My name is Leo, and I'm 32. For now, home is a small apartment here in Austin, Texas. I'm sitting by the window tonight watching the city lights spread out below me like a blanket of scattered embers. There's a strange beauty to Austin after dark, a feeling that's both sprawling and intimate, like it's humming with a secret I can't quite catch. It's a feeling that makes you feel part of everything and completely alone, all at once. I suppose that's why I hold on to these quiet moments. When the noise of the day finally settles, it's just me and the steady rhythm of my own thoughts for company. But tonight feels different. I'm not just looking out at the view, I feel this deep need to finally tell my story. It's the story of a man who seems ordinary on the surface, living a life that has been anything but. It's about the kind of damage that gets inflicted in childhood, the kind that never truly goes away. It just smolders, a low, constant heat deep in your chest. By trade, I'm a software engineer at a tech company in the downtown area. My work isn't glamorous, but it gives me a sense of pride that I can call my own. My days are spent writing code, hunting down elusive bugs, and sometimes losing myself for hours in a logical puzzle that only my computer and I can comprehend. It's a private world with its own language, and there's a unique comfort in that. I'm genuinely passionate about this job, and not only because it keeps a roof over my head. In the clean, predictable world of code, I have absolute control. Every line has a purpose, every command a logical outcome, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos I grew up in. I spent my entire childhood in a quiet suburb just outside of Austin in a 2-story house that looked like it was pulled from a magazine. It had the whole package, a neat white picket fence and a small garden where my mother poured her attention into her flowers. On paper, we were the picture-perfect American family. My father was a loan officer at a local bank, my mother taught first grade, and my younger brother Alex and I were the 2 sons meant to fulfill all the unstated dreams our parents held. But if you're picturing a home filled with easy laughter around the dinner table and comforting hugs, I have to stop you right there. That wasn't our reality. My life was never going to be that simple. I understood from a very early age that I wasn't the sun in our family's solar system. I was just a planet orbiting a much brighter star. That central place, the one that drew all the light and warmth, was reserved exclusively for Alex. My brother, who was 3 years my junior, was our parents' golden child in every sense of the word. Alex was born with a shock of blonde hair, impossibly bright blue eyes, and a natural, easy smile that seemed to disarm everyone he met. He had a kind of natural gravity. People just seemed to orbit him without even realizing it. He could enter a room and within moments become its cheerful, magnetic center. And then there was me, the quiet one with the unruly brown hair and the glasses that always seemed too big for my face. Since I couldn't shine, I tried to be useful. I buried myself in my schoolwork, did every chore without being asked, and poured all my energy into being the son they could be proud of. But it felt like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. My quiet accomplishments were noted with a nod. His were grounds for a parade. The memory of my 8th birthday is still sharp enough to cut. My mom had promised me a real party, a few of my best friends from school, and a chocolate cake. The one I loved more than anything. For weeks, that was my entire world. I lived in a state of buzzing anticipation, marking off each day on the calendar in my room with a big red X. Then the day finally arrived, and so did Alex's cold. It was nothing serious, just a sniffle and a cough, but it was enough. My mother canceled everything to devote the entire afternoon to taking care of him. "Leo, you're the big brother," she told me later, her voice soft with a guilt that wasn't strong enough to move her. "You're old enough to understand, right?" I just stood there and nodded, the word yes getting stuck in my throat. I could feel the disappointment as a physical weight, a cold, heavy stone settling deep in my stomach while the silence of my empty party echoed around me. At dinner that evening, I was given a thin slice of my own birthday cake. Alex, despite his supposed illness, received a much bigger piece. "He needs a little something to cheer him up," my mom explained, as if that made perfect sense. I just sat there, staring down at my meager slice, the question burning in my mind. Was I so invisible that even my own birthday didn't count? Incidents like that weren't rare. They were the rhythm of our lives. My birthdays, my holidays, any event that was meant to celebrate me. Somehow, Alex would always end up at the center of it. It was like a magic trick he performed without even trying. I remember this one time I won first place at the district science fair. I had built this intricate model of a volcano, staying up late for weeks to get the chemical reaction just right. I walked home clutching that small gold-colored trophy, my heart pounding with the hope that this, finally, would be enough to earn their full attention. But when I got inside, I found them both completely absorbed in helping Alex run lines for a school play he was auditioning for. "Congratulations, Leo," my dad said, his voice distracted. He never even looked up from Alex's script. "Just put the trophy on the coffee table. We'll take a proper look at it later." Of course, later never happened. The trophy sat there for days, gathering dust until I quietly moved it to my room. After all this, you might think I hate my brother, but it's not that simple. I don't. Truthfully, he's my little brother, and a part of me will always love him, even when that love feels twisted up with years of frustration. Alex isn't a bad guy. He's just a product of his environment. A world where he never had to ask for anything because it was already being offered to him on a silver platter. He never learned the value of trying because our parents were always 2 steps ahead, clearing every obstacle from his path. As for me, I learned how to fend for myself pretty early on. It was a matter of survival. There's another memory from the summer I turned 15 that I can never seem to push away. I had been accepted into a prestigious science camp up in Fort Worth, a specialized program focused on computer programming, the very thing that would become my life's work. Getting in was a huge deal. I'd spent months building my case to my parents, writing application essays and saving up every dollar I earned from mowing lawns around the neighborhood to help pay for it. After all that effort, they finally said yes. I was ecstatic. But just a week before I was supposed to leave, Alex decided he wanted to go to an expensive, high-profile basketball clinic. The shift in the house was immediate. "He has real potential, Leo," my mother said, her voice practically vibrating with excitement for him. "This is an investment in Alex's future." And just like that, the funds that had been allocated for my science camp, my future, were rerouted to pay for Alex's basketball dreams. I never got to go to Fort Worth that year. Instead, I spent that summer cooped up in our garage, taking apart and rebuilding old bicycles, trying to focus on the grease and metal so I wouldn't have to feel the sting of tears on my cheeks. You might assume that after a while I would have grown numb to it all, that I'd have learned to simply accept my place. But that's not how it works. With every single slight, another small piece of my heart chipped away. I started to internalize the blame, wondering what was so fundamentally wrong with me. Was I just not good enough to earn the kind of unconditional love that flowed so freely toward Alex? My response was to try even harder. I pushed myself to get better grades, to be more obedient, to sacrifice more of myself. But it was like pouring water into sand. Nothing I did ever made a difference. I perfected the role of the understanding older brother, the responsible one who always yielded, who always put the family's harmony before his own needs. On the outside, I was compliant. On the inside, I felt myself fading, becoming a ghost in my own home. As I got older, the imbalance didn't fade, it just became more pronounced. I'll never forget the day my acceptance letter from the University of Texas arrived. I had gotten into their computer science program, my absolute first choice. It was, without a doubt, one of the purest moments of joy in my entire life. I ran all the way home from the mailbox, clutching that thick envelope, my mind racing with visions of my parents finally seeing me, hugging me, and telling me how proud they were. But when I burst through the door and shared the news, my dad just gave me a brief nod before turning back to the television. My mom's reaction was a look of deep concern. "Leo, we just don't have the money for that kind of tuition," she said, her voice weighed down with apology. "You know how tight things are right now." I was floored. I stood there, the letter suddenly feeling like a worthless piece of paper in my hand. I knew we weren't wealthy, but I'd always believed their promises that they were putting money aside for my education. Once again, I swallowed the familiar bitterness of disappointment and started the grueling process of hunting down scholarships and applying for part-time jobs. I was determined to make it happen on my own. Fast forward 3 years. When Alex got his own college acceptance letter, the family's financial situation had apparently undergone a miraculous transformation. My parents not only covered his full tuition but also cashed out insurance policies and drained their savings to make sure he had everything he could possibly need. I overheard my mother on the phone with a neighbor one afternoon explaining that Alex required a nurturing environment to reach his full potential. She said he had the makings of a successful entrepreneur. And me? I was just the son who was expected to figure it out. I put myself through college by working 2 part-time jobs. I spent my days in class and my evenings on my feet for hours, steaming milk and making lattes at a campus coffee shop. From there, I'd rush to the library to tutor undergraduates in math, all just to scrape together enough money for tuition and textbooks. Every single month, I watched my bank account empty out as my student loan debt grew, a dark cloud gathering over my future. I'm not sharing all of this just to complain. I swear that's not it. I just need you to understand the world I came from. I grew up in a family where love felt conditional, and the primary condition was that I had to make myself smaller so my brother could be bigger. I learned to survive that way, to become completely self-reliant. But the wounds from that kind of upbringing, that constant nagging feeling of being invisible, of being fundamentally unlovable, they don't just vanish. They stay with you dormant and smoldering, just waiting for the right circumstances to ignite. And then one day they did. A day came that I never could have seen coming, and everything caught fire. It happened on an afternoon in late October. The Austin sky was a heavy, oppressive gray, the clouds hanging so low they felt like they were pressing down on the whole city. I had just left the office, my brain completely fried after a long day of chasing down a stubborn bug in our system. I was bone tired. My thoughts were still stuck in a loop, replaying a tense email from my manager demanding we push a project across the finish line ahead of schedule. I was heading home in my beat-up car, a 2005 Toyota Camry I'd bought off a guy at work, making my way down I-35. The radio was blasting "Welcome to the Jungle" by Guns N' Roses, and I was humming along, trying to use the noise to drown out the stress knotting up my chest. Then it all happened in a blur. I can't recall the exact sequence of events, just the terrifying feeling of it all unfolding too fast to process. One second I was driving, the next I looked up and a massive pickup truck from the lane beside me swerved directly into my path. There was no time to think. I stomped on the brakes with all my might, but the asphalt was slick from an earlier drizzle. The sound of my tires screaming was immediately swallowed by the sickening crunch of metal on metal. The impact threw my body forward so hard the seatbelt felt like it was cutting me in half. I saw the windshield spiderweb into a million pieces in front of my face. My head slammed against something. The steering wheel maybe, or the side window, I don't know for sure. And then, there was only darkness. When I woke up, the first thing I registered was the sharp, sterile smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils. I was flat on my back in a hospital bed. A relentless pounding throb pulsed through my skull, and my right leg felt like it was trapped under a concrete block, impossibly heavy and numb. I tried to shift my weight, but a searing pain shot through me and a groan escaped my lips before I could stop it. A soft voice spoke from somewhere beside me. "Easy there. Try not to move too much, you just woke up." I blinked, my vision slowly coming into focus. A nurse with her hair pulled back in a tight bun was adjusting the IV drip attached to my arm. Her expression was a mixture of professional calm and genuine kindness. Where am I?" I managed to croak out, my throat raw. "You're at St. David's Medical Center," she answered, her voice even. "You were in a serious car accident, but you're in stable condition now. You have a compound fracture in your right leg and a moderate concussion. We're keeping a close eye on you." I nodded feebly, my mind struggling to assemble the pieces of what she was telling me. But the physical pain wasn't what struck me the most in that moment. It was the sudden, crushing weight of my own solitude. I was lying in a hospital bed, broken and disoriented, and there wasn't a single familiar face in the room. My voice was raspy when I asked, Has anyone been here to see me?" The nurse paused for a fraction of a second, a flicker of pity crossing her face. "Not yet," she said gently, "but you were only admitted a few hours ago. I'm sure your family is on their way." I tried to force a small smile, but it felt like a lie. Deep down, in that cold, empty space in my chest, I had a sinking feeling that no one was coming for me. My parents, Alex. They would have their own priorities. They always did. I shut my eyes tight, fighting back the familiar bitter sting that was rising in my throat. The next few days passed in a monotonous blur of medication, routine medical checks, and a constant grinding pain. My leg was encased in a heavy cast, and while the pounding in my head gradually subsided, the ache in my heart only grew heavier. After 3 days, when the fog of the painkillers had lifted just enough for me to hold a phone steady, I finally called my mom. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. I think I just needed to hear her voice to get some small proof that I hadn't been completely erased from their world. "Hello, Leo?" Her voice sounded anxious when she answered. "Are you okay? What's going on?" I took a breath, trying to keep my own voice from shaking as I explained what had happened. "I was in a car wreck, Mom. My leg is broken and I have a concussion. I'm at the hospital." I paused, the next words catching in my throat. "They think I'll be here for at least a couple of weeks." I finally managed to say what I really called for. "Mom, can you come? I need you guys right now." The silence that followed stretched on for so long that I started to wonder if the line had gone dead. Then finally I heard her let out a long, heavy sigh. "Leo, I am so sorry to hear this," she began. "But your father and I are with Alex. He's having a really hard time. He and his girlfriend just broke up and he's a wreck. I have to be here for him right now." She paused and then delivered the line I knew was coming. "You're his big brother, you understand, don't you?" The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. It felt like all the air had been knocked out of my lungs. Alex broke up with his girlfriend? Again? I could tick off at least a dozen dramatic, short-lived romances that Alex had treated like earth-shattering tragedies, and that, another messy breakup, was more important than this. Here I was, lying in a hospital bed with shattered bones and a brain injury, and I still wasn't worth a single day of their attention. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I couldn't control. "I'm in the hospital. I was in a car accident. I need you here." "You're an adult, Leo," she replied, and now her tone was laced with a sharp edge of impatience. "You've always been so good at handling things on your own. I promise we'll come visit as soon as we can, but Alex really needs his mother right now." Her voice softened again, back to its familiar placating tone. "Get some rest. I'll call you to check in later." And then the line went dead. I just stared at the blank screen of my phone, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. It felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. The tears I had been choking back for days, for years, finally broke free, hot and angry, streaming down my face. I wasn't crying because of the pain in my leg or my head. I was crying for a much deeper wound, the raw, final realization that no matter how badly I was hurt, no matter what happened to me, I would always be their second choice. Or their third, or maybe I'd never be chosen at all. For the next few days, I drifted in and out of a strange, hazy state, suspended somewhere between the dulling effect of the medication and vivid, recurring nightmares. I kept dreaming I was a little boy again, standing on the porch of our old house, peering through the living room window. Inside, I could see my parents holding Alex, surrounding him with warmth and affection, while I was left outside in the cold, completely invisible. In the dream, I would pound on the glass and scream their names, but they never turned around. They couldn't hear me. I shot awake from one of these dreams, my body drenched in a cold sweat and my heart hammering against my ribs. "Leo, are you all right?" A voice cut through the lingering panic, pulling me back to the present. It was the same nurse from my first day, the one with the kind eyes. She was standing beside my bed, holding out a cup of water. "That must have been some bad dream," she said softly. "You look pale." I was still panting, trying to catch my breath. Just a nightmare," I managed to say. "Thanks." She gave me a small, reassuring smile and handed me the cup. "My name is Sarah, by the way," she said. "Drink some of this, and if you ever want to talk about it, I'm a good listener." I looked at her, a little taken aback by her offer. Sarah. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but my head was still too clouded to make a connection. I took a long sip of the cool water, the simple sensation helping to ground me. "Sarah, have you been a nurse here for a while?" I asked, mostly just to fill the silence. She laughed, a warm, easy sound, and settled into the visitor's chair next to my bed. "About 3 years now," she said. "But you look really familiar to me too. Did you happen to go to Northwood High?" I blinked, surprised by the question. "Yeah, I did. How did you know that?" Sarah's laugh was bright, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "We were in the same 11th grade biology class," she said. "We sat at the same lab table. I was the girl who was always forgetting her pencils and had to borrow one from you." Suddenly, the memories came rushing back. Sarah. The quiet, dark-haired girl who usually kept to herself. We hadn't been friends, not really, but I remembered her gentle demeanor. The way she always sincerely thanked me whenever I'd lend her a pencil or help her with a confusing part of the lab. "Oh my God, Sarah," I exclaimed, a genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time in days. "It really is you. How on earth did I not recognize you?" "Probably the new haircut," she teased, gesturing to her short bob. "You, on the other hand, same old Leo," I finished for her, just with a few more miles and a lot more tired. I actually laughed, a real laugh, and the feeling was so foreign it was startling. It felt like a heavy blanket had been lifted, letting a sliver of light into the sterile gloom of my room. From that day forward, Sarah became the one bright spot in my endless gray days. She was more than just my nurse, more than the person who checked my vitals, changed my dressings, and brought my medication on schedule. She would often stay for a few minutes after her shift ended just to talk. She'd tell me little stories from her life, about the time she almost set her apartment on fire trying to bake a cake, or about her ongoing battle to keep her stubborn cat off the kitchen counters. Those small, normal stories were a lifeline, pulling me out of the swamp of my own pain and loneliness, if only for a little while. One evening, as Sarah was helping me with the hospital's tasteless chicken broth, the question just tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop it. "Sarah, why are you being so nice to me? I mean, I'm just some random patient and you must have a million other things to do." She stopped what she was doing and looked at me, a thoughtful expression on her face. After a moment, she let out a soft sigh and set the soup bowl down on the tray. "Leo, you're not just a random patient to me," she said quietly. "I see a lot of myself in you. Back in high school, I really looked up to you. You were always so focused and hardworking, but you were never arrogant about it. You were just kind. I also knew things weren't always easy for you at home," she continued. "I overheard you talking about your brother, Alex, a few times during lunch. Do you remember that?" I nodded slowly, a faint memory surfacing of me complaining about Alex to a classmate once or twice. "I was in the same boat," Sarah said, her voice dropping a little. "I have a younger sister and my parents always put her first. I know exactly what it feels like to be invisible in your own family, to feel like you've been left behind. So when I saw you lying here all by yourself, I just couldn't let you feel that way. Not again." Her words struck me with the force of a revelation. It wasn't a painful blow, but something that unlocked a door inside me that I had sealed shut years ago. My throat felt tight and my eyes started to burn. "Sarah," I whispered, the words thick with emotion. "I called my mom. I begged her to come, but she told me that Alex needed her more because he and his girlfriend broke up." Sarah's brow furrowed and a spark of genuine anger flashed in her eyes. "He broke up with his girlfriend?" she repeated, her voice sharp with disbelief. "While you're in here after you almost died? Leo, that's not what family does. That's toxic." The word hung in the air between us. Toxic. It echoed in my mind like a loud, clear bell. I had never, not once, allowed myself to think of my family in those terms. To me, they were just my family. Unfair, yes, a source of constant pain, absolutely, but still they were my family. And now here was Sarah, a near stranger from my past, using her quiet honesty and deep empathy to make me confront a truth I had spent my entire life avoiding. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I have spent my whole life trying to win their approval, trying to earn their love, and it's never, ever been enough." Sarah reached out and took my hand, her grip gentle but firm. "Leo, love isn't something you're supposed to earn," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "You deserve to be loved just as you are. But before anything else can change, you have to learn how to protect yourself. You need to set boundaries, not to get revenge, but to give yourself some peace." I stared into her eyes and saw a depth of sincerity I had rarely experienced in my life. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt truly seen. I felt understood. In that quiet hospital room, I knew that the path ahead was going to be difficult and long. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to walk it by myself. In the weeks that followed, Sarah was a constant presence. She was there to help me with my first agonizing attempts to walk on crutches, her steady presence giving me the courage to push through the pain. One afternoon, she brought in a worn paperback copy of The Catcher in the Rye and would read chapters aloud to me when my head ached too much to focus on the words myself. She told me more about her own family, about how she had slowly, painfully learned to create distance from her parents' blatant favoritism toward her sister. She talked about the difficult process of building a life that was entirely her own, separate from their expectations and judgments. Her stories did more than just offer comfort. They planted a seed in my mind. The idea of setting boundaries, a concept that had always seemed selfish and unthinkable, suddenly felt like a possibility. It felt like survival. Then one morning, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. I saw my dad's name on the screen and answered, bracing myself. His voice, when it came through, was strained and frantic, a stark contrast to his usual measured, calm tone. "Leo, are you all right? Your mother just told me everything about the accident. I'm so sorry we haven't been there, but we need you. We need your help right now." He took a ragged breath. "Our house, Leo, the house burned down. It's gone. Everything is gone." I sat frozen in my hospital bed, clutching the phone to my ear, my mind struggling to process his words. The house burned down? The house where I grew up, the building that held all those memories, most of them painful, but mine nonetheless, was just gone? I forced myself to take a deep, steadying breath. "Dad, is everyone safe? Are you and Mom and Alex okay?" "We're fine," he answered, his voice thick with emotion. "We all got out. Alex is safe. But the house, son, it's a total loss. Everything we owned, the furniture, the photos, all of it. It's just a pile of ashes." I closed my eyes and an image of the two-story house with the white picket fence immediately formed in my mind. I could see the small garden where my mother had fussed over her roses. I could remember sitting on the front steps on summer nights, looking up at the stars and wishing for the day my parents would finally notice me. And now all of it had been erased. But as the initial shock began to fade, I realized something strange. Underneath it all, I didn't feel the sharp grief I expected to feel. Maybe it was because in my heart that house had never truly been a home to me. It was just a place where I lived. "Dad, what happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How did it start?" He let out a long, weary sigh. "It was your mother," he said, his voice heavy with a mix of regret and exhaustion. "She was making some food for Alex to take with him before she left to see him. In her rush, she forgot to turn off the stove. The fire started in the kitchen and it moved so fast. By the time the fire trucks got here, there was nothing they could do." I didn't say anything. A familiar heavy weight settled in my chest. My mother forgot to turn off the stove because she was preoccupied with Alex's latest crisis. Of course, it was always Alex. I shouldn't have been surprised, but the reality of it still managed to twist like a dull knife in my gut. I could picture it perfectly, my mother, flustered and distracted, fussing over Alex's feelings while I was miles away, lying in a hospital bed with a broken leg and a concussion. And now, because of that singular focus, our entire family was homeless. "I'm so sorry, Dad," I said, the words feeling hollow and automatic. I wasn't even sure what I was feeling. "Where are you guys staying? Is there anything I can do to help?" He paused for a moment, and I could almost hear him choosing his next words with care. "We're at a motel near the house for the time being," he said. "But Leo, we lost it all. The insurance will help, but it's not going to be enough to cover everything. I was hoping you could help us out." His request landed like a punch to the stomach. They couldn't be bothered to visit me when I was lying here, possibly dying. But the second they needed something, they knew my number. I squeezed the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, a hot surge of anger rising in my throat. "Dad, I'm still in the hospital," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I can barely walk, and I don't have any money." "You've always been so responsible with your savings, Leo," he pressed, his tone shifting into a familiar pleading whine. "Just a little something to help us get back on our feet. You're the oldest son. You understand your responsibility." This time I didn't say anything. I just ended the call. My heart was hammering in my chest, but it wasn't from worry. It was from the cold, hard clarity of a bitter truth finally sinking in. To them, I wasn't a son. I was a resource. I was only valuable when I had something they needed. Later that day, I told Sarah everything about the phone call, the fire, my mother's devastating oversight. She listened patiently without saying a word, just nodding as I spoke. When I got to the part about my dad asking me for money, her expression hardened. "They didn't come to see you once, but now they're asking you for financial help," she said, her voice sharp. "Leo, you have to see how incredibly messed up that is, right?" "I know," I sighed, feeling exhausted. "But they're my family, Sarah. I can't just turn my back on them when they have nothing." Sarah tilted her head, her gaze steady and serious. "Being family doesn't mean you have to set yourself on fire to keep them warm, Leo," she said softly. "They abandoned you when you needed them the most. It's time for you to finally put yourself first." Her words cut through the fog of guilt and obligation that had clouded my mind for years. She was right. I had spent my entire life making sacrifices, giving up pieces of myself, and all it had ever gotten me was a profound sense of emptiness. This time, things had to be different. For the next few days after my father's call, my mind was a chaotic storm of conflicting emotions and thoughts. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that two-story house, the one with the neat white fence, now just a pile of smoldering rubble. I couldn't untangle my feelings about it. Was it grief, anger, or just a profound, hollow emptiness? Sarah continued to visit me every day, bringing me coffee from a cafe down the street and sharing little anecdotes from her shift, but I knew she could see the turmoil in my eyes. "Are you doing okay, Leo?" she'd ask, her voice gentle but firm. I would just nod, not wanting to unload all of my family's drama onto her. She had already done so much. Then one morning I was in the middle of a painful physical therapy session, trying to master the awkward rhythm of walking with crutches while Sarah offered encouragement. Suddenly the door to my room swung open without a knock. My parents stood there looking more haggard and defeated than I had ever seen them in my life. My father's gray hair was uncombed and his eyes were shadowed and sunken. He stared at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. My mother, her face blotchy and her eyes swollen from crying, hurried over to my bed and clutched my hand. "Oh, Leo, my sweet boy," she said, her voice shaking. "I am so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad. Seeing you laid up like this, it just breaks my heart." I looked up at her face and a hard lump formed in my throat. A small, wounded part of me desperately wanted to believe her, to wrap my arms around her and tell her it was okay, that I was still their good, understanding son. But another, much louder part of me, the part that had been systematically ignored for 30 years, was screaming a warning. This wasn't the first time they had shown up with apologies and tears, only to pivot their attention right back to Alex the moment he needed something. So I just nodded, saying nothing, waiting for the other shoe to drop. My dad came closer, placing a hand on my good shoulder. His eyes were filled with a manufactured concern. "You look better than I thought you would, Leo," he said. "The doctors told us you're going to make a full recovery, right?" He paused, glancing over at my mother as if for support. "We've been worried sick, you know we have, but..." He trailed off, his gaze dropping to the floor. "We're in real trouble, son. That fire, it took everything. The house, all our belongings, a lifetime of memories, all gone. We have nowhere to go. We have nothing left." I felt Sarah move beside me, a subtle shift of her weight as she leaned in slightly, as if preparing to shield me from the inevitable blow. I took a deep breath, my voice coming out raspy. "I know, Dad. I'm sorry about the house, but I'm still in the hospital. I can't even walk on my own yet, and I don't have any savings to speak of." My mother squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes welling up with tears. "Leo, you have always been the strong one, the responsible one," she pleaded. "You've always known how to take care of things. We just need a little help to get through this rough patch. The insurance money will come through eventually, but it won't be enough to rebuild. You can help us, can't you? Please. Just this one time." Her words didn't cut me like a knife, They landed like a dull, familiar thud. Just this one time. You're the big brother, you understand? Alex needs us more right now. It was always the same script, just a different crisis. I looked from my mother's tear-streaked face to my father's desperate one and saw it all with sickening clarity. Their initial show of concern wasn't for me at all. It was just the opening act for what they had really come for. My money. My sacrifice. Again. Sarah, who had been standing silently beside me, finally spoke. She stepped forward, positioning herself slightly between me and my parents. Her voice was quiet, but it had an edge of ice. "I'm sorry," she said, looking directly at my parents, "but I have to say something. Leo has just been through a life-threatening accident. He has a serious fracture, a traumatic brain injury, and he is in the middle of a long and difficult recovery. You weren't here for him when he needed you the most, but now you're here asking him to bail you out? Do you have any idea how unfair that is?" My mother looked stunned. She turned to Sarah, her mouth slightly open as if she couldn't comprehend that someone would dare to challenge her. "And who are you to get involved in our private family business?" she demanded, her voice sharp with indignation. "This is between my son and me." Sarah didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her gaze unwavering. "I'm Leo's friend," she said calmly. "And I'm the one who has been here with him every single day, helping him, talking to him, while his own family was nowhere to be found. Leo almost died in that accident, but you were too busy consoling Alex over a breakup. Now your house is gone and you show up expecting Leo to solve your problems. That's not how a family is supposed to work. That's exploitation." My dad stepped in, his voice low and strained. "You don't understand our situation," he said, his eyes darting between Sarah and me. "Alex needs us. He's sensitive. He's not strong like Leo is." He gestured vaguely as if to dismiss the fire. "This whole thing, it was a terrible accident, but we don't have any other options. Leo is the oldest. It's his responsibility to help us." A hot flush of anger surged through me. Responsibility. I had shouldered that word my entire life. I had sacrificed my dreams, my needs, my own well-being for that responsibility. And it had left me with nothing but a hollow ache in my chest. Sarah glanced at me, and in her eyes I saw a silent plea. "Don't let them do this to you again, Leo." I knew she was right. If I didn't draw a line right here, right now, I would be trapped in this suffocating cycle of one-sided sacrifice for the rest of my life. I took a long, shaky breath, gathering all the strength I had left in my battered body. "Hey, Dad, Mom," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm glad you're both safe, but I can't do this anymore." I looked them both in the eye. I have heard these same excuses my entire life. I have always been the one to give in, to step back, to sacrifice. But not this time. I paused, letting the words sink in. "I will help you. But I will only cover half of the rebuilding costs. Alex needs to be responsible for the other half. And I want you to go to a lawyer and draw up a will that divides all family assets equally between the two of us. I am done being your afterthought." My mother stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief, as if I had just started speaking a foreign language. "Leo, how can you say that to us?" she gasped. "We are your family." "Alex doesn't have your skills," she protested. "He can't manage this. He needs our support." "No, Mom," I cut her off, my voice stronger now than it had ever been. "Alex is a grown man. He has been coddled his entire life, and it has to stop. If you want my help, those are my terms. Take them or leave them." My father just stood there, his hands balled into fists at his sides, his face a mask of conflict. "You've changed, Leo," he said finally, his voice thick with a sorrow that felt completely misplaced. "You're not the same understanding boy we raised." A small, weary smile touched my lips. For the first time in what felt like forever, a massive weight was lifting from my shoulders. "No, Dad," I said, "I'm still Leo. But I'm finally learning how to value myself. I can't live my life in the background anymore, just trying to please everyone else." My father had no response. My mother shot a look of pure venom at Sarah, her eyes blazing with resentment, but she didn't say another word. And then, without another promise or apology, they turned and walked out of my room. The door clicked shut behind them, leaving an echoing silence in its wake. After a long moment, I reached out and took Sarah's hand. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done today without you." She smiled, her eyes shining. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Leo," she said. "You just needed a reminder. I just helped you find your own voice." In the days that followed that explosive confrontation, the air in my hospital room felt different. It felt lighter. My body still ached, but Sarah continued to stop by every day, bringing me her slightly overbaked cookies and a smile that had the power to make me forget the dull throb in my head. But underneath it all, the situation with my family was still a tangled, unresolved knot in my gut. I knew I had finally set a boundary, but was it enough to actually change anything? Or was I just clinging to a fragile, unrealistic hope? About a week later, a text message from my dad lit up my phone screen. It was short and completely devoid of emotion, like a business update. "Leo, we've hired a contractor to start the rebuild. Alex has agreed to contribute his half of the costs. Thanks." I must have read the message 10 times, searching between the lines for some sign of a shift, some hint of remorse, or even just a simple question about how I was doing. But there was nothing. It was just a transaction. I put my phone down with a heavy sigh. Sarah, who was sitting in the chair beside me, immediately noticed the change in my mood. "Your family again?" she asked softly. I just nodded and told her about the text. "I wasn't expecting a grand apology tour," I said, my voice low. "But after everything that's happened, I guess I just thought something might be different." Sarah tilted her head, her expression full of a familiar, gentle empathy. "Leo, you did the right thing," she said. "Setting that boundary was a huge step. But you can't expect them to magically transform overnight. The truth is, they might never change. The important thing is that you've stopped letting them dictate your life and your feelings." She was right. Logically, I knew she was right. But there was still a small, stubborn part of me, the little boy who had spent his entire life craving their approval. That was still holding out hope for the day they would finally, truly see me. A few days later, the demolition and rebuilding of my parents' house officially began. But from what I heard, it wasn't going smoothly. My dad called me several times with frantic updates. The contractors had discovered that the foundation was more damaged than they'd initially thought, and the estimated cost to rebuild had nearly doubled. I listened to his panicked reports, but I refused to let him pull me back into their drama. "Dad, I was very clear about my terms," I said, keeping my voice as calm and steady as I could. "I am paying for my half. You, Mom, and Alex need to figure out the rest." He was quiet for a long moment before he finally sighed. "You've gotten a lot tougher than you used to be, Leo." I didn't bother to reply. I didn't feel the need to explain that this newfound toughness wasn't a weapon to hurt them. It was a shield to protect myself. Alex, as I had fully expected, was not pleased with the new arrangement. He sent me a long, rambling text message full of accusations and guilt trips. "Dude, you know I don't have that kind of money. Why are you putting me in this position? You're my older brother. You're supposed to be the one who helps the family." Reading his words was like looking at a distorted reflection of my younger self, the version of me who believed that helping the family was synonymous with self-annihilation. I texted back a simple reply. "Alex, you're an adult. This is our shared responsibility." He didn't respond, but I found out from my dad a few days later that Alex had ended up borrowing the money from a friend to cover his portion of the costs. My parents, meanwhile, started to show the first faint signs of acknowledging the deep imbalance in how they had raised us. During one of our brief phone calls, my mother said, her voice hesitant, "I know you're still angry with us, Leo. I never meant to cause you any pain. I just always wanted what was best for both of my boys." I didn't take the bait. I simply replied, "I'm not angry, Mom. I just want things to be fair." She didn't push it, but for the first time I got the sense that she was actually thinking about what I'd said, even if she wasn't ready to admit she had been wrong. A few weeks later, my father emailed me a scanned copy of their newly drafted will, just as I had demanded. It clearly stated that all of their assets would be divided equally between Alex and me upon their deaths. As I read through the legal language, I felt a small sense of relief, but I wasn't naive. I knew that a piece of paper couldn't magically erase a lifetime of emotional wounds. My relationship with my parents and my brother was still incredibly tense. It felt like a thin, frayed cord stretched between us, ready to snap at the slightest pressure. But for the first time, that didn't scare me. I was finally learning how to exist without needing their constant validation. After nearly a month in the hospital, I was finally discharged. The day I left, the Austin sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and a crisp early winter wind cut through my thin jacket. Sarah stood beside me in my room, helping me stuff my few belongings into an old duffel bag. "Ready to rejoin the land of the living, big guy?" she asked with a playful wink. "Not even close," I laughed, my crutches thumping awkwardly on the polished floor as I made my way down the hallway. "But having you around definitely helps." Sarah drove me back to my little apartment in the heart of downtown Austin. Unlocking the front door felt strange, like I was entering someone else's home. Everything was exactly as I had left it. My messy desk piled high with books, the shelves overflowing with programming manuals, the worn-out couch where I used to spend my weekends. The apartment hadn't changed, but I had. The accident, the confrontation with my family, the unexpected friendship with Sarah. It had all rewired me in ways I was only just beginning to understand. Those first few weeks back home were a slow, difficult climb back to normalcy. My leg was in constant throbbing pain, and I had to go to physical therapy 3 times a week. I was on paid medical leave from my job, but I knew that wouldn't last forever. The fear of my savings dwindling was a constant pressure. I tried to ease back into my routine by working from home, coding for a few hours each day, but I often had to stop because of the sudden, splitting headaches that still ambushed me without warning. Throughout it all, Sarah became an essential part of my life. She would stop by my apartment almost every evening after her shift, usually with food in hand. Sometimes it was pizza, other times it was a dish she had made herself, like the spaghetti with a special tomato sauce that she proudly claimed was a secret family recipe. We would sit on my lumpy couch and eat and talk, or sometimes we'd just watch an old movie, comfortable in the shared silence. Those quiet, simple evenings were everything to me. They made me feel like, for the first time in my life, I had found a place where I truly belonged. One night, we were in the middle of rewatching Good Will Hunting. For what must have been the 10th time, when Sarah turned to me, her expression suddenly serious. "Leo," she said, "have you thought at all about the future? I mean, what you want now, after everything you've been through?" I paused the movie, hesitating. I wasn't sure I had an answer to that question yet. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I'm just trying to take things one day at a time. I don't want to get caught up worrying about things I can't control." I turned the question back on her. "What about you? What do you think about?" She smiled, but her eyes were pensive. "I think about living a life that I won't look back on with regret," she said. I think about being happy. I spent so many years trying to live up to my family's expectations just like you did, she continued. But I'm done with that. Now I just want to live for me. And I want you to be able to do that too. Her words resonated deep within me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that she was so much more than just the kind person who had helped me navigate the darkest period of my life. She was someone I couldn't imagine my future without. I reached for her hand and held it, my voice soft when I spoke. Sarah, I can't promise you anything grand or perfect. But what I can promise is that I will spend every day from now on trying to be the best man I can be. And I want to do that with you by my side. A faint blush colored her cheeks and she looked down at our joined hands. But I could see the brilliant smile that spread across her face. It's a deal, Leo, she said, looking back up at me. But only if you promise to stop making fun of my cooking. Our relationship didn't blossom overnight. It grew slowly and organically, nurtured by all the small moments we shared. It grew during our slow, shuffling walks around the neighborhood park while I was still learning to trust my leg again. It grew over late-night talks on my couch and shared meals of takeout pizza. It grew when she helped me reorganize my chaotic bookshelves, and we got into a heated but friendly debate over whether Dune or The Lord of the Rings was the superior work of fiction. It grew on the nights she would fall asleep on my sofa while reading, the book sliding from her hands to the floor. We hadn't put a label on what we were, not yet, but I knew deep in my bones that Sarah had become the most important person in my world. At Sarah's gentle urging, I started seeing a therapist. The sessions were raw and difficult, talking about my childhood, about the decades I'd spent feeling invisible and unworthy of love, was like reopening old wounds. But every time I walked out of that office, I felt a little bit lighter, as if I were slowly, painstakingly breaking the invisible chains that had held me down for so long. My professional life began to stabilize as well. I was finally able to return to the office after 3 months of working from home. My colleagues greeted me with a welcome back cake and warm hugs. "You're one tough guy, Leo," one of them said, clapping me on the shoulder. I just smiled. I knew that my resilience wasn't mine alone. It was a product of Sarah's unwavering support, the hard work I was doing in therapy, and the life-altering decision to finally stand up for myself. My parents, in the meantime, had moved into a small rental apartment while their house was being rebuilt. I didn't reach out to them very often, just a brief phone call every now and then to check in. I noticed that my mother had started asking more questions about my recovery, about what I was eating, even offering to bring me food. I could sense that she was trying, in her own awkward way, to bridge the gap between us. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down completely. I still needed time. We both did. Surprisingly, it was Alex who seemed to be undergoing the most significant change. He called me one afternoon, and for the first time, his voice was free of its usual entitled, resentful tone. "Hey, man," he said. "I'm looking for a second job. I don't want Mom and Dad to have to worry about all this stuff anymore." I had no idea what had prompted this sudden shift in him. Maybe it was the financial pressure of the rebuild, or maybe he was finally starting to understand that he couldn't depend on our parents to solve all of his problems forever. Whatever the reason, I felt a small flicker of hope, not for our broken family, but for Alex himself. A year passed. I was standing in my small apartment, the late afternoon sun casting long golden stripes across the floor. The space wasn't big, but tonight it was overflowing with warmth and laughter. The cheerful sound of clinking glasses and the rich, savory smell of the roast chicken Sarah had insisted on making. My eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of my closest friends from college, a few of my favorite coworkers, and Sarah herself moving through the small crowd with a happy, effortless grace, a radiant smile on her face. But the most surprising addition to the scene, the one that still felt slightly unreal, was the sight of my parents and Alex sitting together in a corner of the living room. They looked a little uncomfortable, a little out of place, but they were trying to engage in the conversations around them. I had agonized for weeks over whether or to invite them. A large part of me wanted this night to be reserved exclusively for the people who had shown up for me when I was at my lowest. But Sarah, with her usual quiet wisdom, had gently convinced me to reconsider. "Leo," she had said to me one night as we were putting together the guest list, "inviting them doesn't mean you're erasing everything that happened. It just means you're finally strong enough to let them back into your life, but on your own terms." And as always, she had been right. I sent the invitation, not really expecting them to accept. So when they all confirmed they would be there, I was filled with a strange mixture of shock and nervous anticipation. The party was a bigger success than I could have hoped for. My college buddies were telling embarrassing stories about our younger days, and my co-workers were good-naturedly roasting me for my habit of being the first one in the office every morning with a giant cup of black coffee. Sarah moved through it all like a seasoned pro, keeping the mood light and making sure everyone's glass was full. She was wearing a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, and every time I looked at her, I felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked me over. This was the woman who had fundamentally changed the entire course of my life. My parents and Alex had settled at the dining table, making polite conversation with some of my friends. Every so often, I would catch my mother looking over at me. Her expression was different tonight. It wasn't the guilt-ridden or defensive look I was used to seeing. It was something softer, more contemplative, as if she was finally trying to see me not as a role I was meant to play, but as a person. Alex, to my surprise, seemed more relaxed and comfortable than I had ever seen him. He was telling a story about his new job, a sales position at a local tech startup, and I realized with a jolt that he hadn't once mentioned our parents or their financial support. About an hour into the party, my dad stood up and raised his wine glass, tapping it gently with a fork to get everyone's attention. My heart started to pound in my chest. I had no idea what he was about to do. "I'd just like to say a few words, if I may," he began, his voice a little unsteady but clear. "Today is a very special occasion, not just because of this lovely party, but because we are all here to celebrate Leo, our son, who is stronger and happier than we have ever seen him." He turned and looked directly at me, his eyes glistening. "Leo, your mother and we haven't always been the parents you deserved. We made a lot of mistakes. We were unfair to you, and we caused you a great deal of pain. And for that, from the bottom of my heart, I am truly sorry." My mother, who was standing beside him, squeezed his hand, her own eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry too, Leo," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't think I ever realized how much I was hurting you until Sarah came into your life." She then turned to Sarah and gave her a small, genuine smile. "Sarah, you are a truly remarkable woman," she said. "You didn't just take care of our son when he was at his worst. You helped us open our eyes to our own failings. You taught him how to be strong, and in doing so, you showed us that we needed to change. Thank you. Thank you for everything." A hush fell over the room. Sarah, who was standing next to me, blushed deeply, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of attention. She squeezed my hand under the table and offered my mother a shy smile. "I just did what anyone would have done," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "Leo deserves to be loved and supported. I just wanted to make sure he knew that." Then, to my utter astonishment, Alex stood up as well. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking more awkward and uncertain than I had ever seen him. "Hey, man," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine across the room. "I know I've been a pretty terrible brother. I took advantage of the way things were, and I know I hurt you. I'm really trying to be a better person now, and thanks. Thanks for not completely giving up on us, even when you had every right to." I looked from Alex's face to my parents, and a powerful wave of emotion washed over me. I had never in my wildest dreams expected to hear those words. I had never expected this public acknowledgement, this raw, unfiltered apology. Just a year ago, I had been convinced that I was destined to live my entire life as a ghost in my own family. But now, standing here, surrounded by the people who loved me and the people who had hurt me, I understood something fundamental. I didn't need their validation to be whole. I was already whole on my own. I stood up and raised my own glass, taking a moment to steady my voice. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," I began, my gaze sweeping across the room. A year ago, I never would have believed that I would be standing here in my own home, feeling this happy. I've been through a lot in the last 12 months. A near-fatal accident, a lot of pain, and a lot of days where I genuinely questioned whether or not I was even worthy of being loved. I paused and looked at Sarah, my heart full. And then I reconnected with Sarah, who taught me that love isn't something you have to earn through self-sacrifice. She showed me that true family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who choose to stand with you unconditionally, and she gave me the courage to finally set boundaries. Not as a way to punish anyone, but as a way to protect my own heart. I turned to face my parents and my brother. "Dad, Mom, Alex," I said, "thank you for coming tonight. And thank you for what you said. I have no idea what the future holds for us, but my hope is that we can start to rebuild our relationship piece by piece on a foundation of honesty and fairness. But the most important thing I've learned this past year is this. My happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It depends on me. It depends on the choices I make. And from now on, I choose to live a life of self-respect and self-love." The room broke into warm applause, and a few of my friends let out a cheer, the festive energy returning. Sarah leaned in and kissed my cheek. "You were amazing, Leo," she whispered. I squeezed her hand, my heart feeling lighter and fuller than it had in years. The party went on late into the night. As people started to head home, my parents came over to say goodbye. My mother hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "I'm so proud of the man you've become, Leo. I promise, I'm going to try to be a better mother to you." My dad just nodded, his hand resting on my shoulder for a long moment. Before he left, Alex came over and said so quietly that only I could hear, "I'm going to keep working on it, man. I mean it." I didn't say much in return, just a nod and a small smile. When the last of the guests had gone and the front door was finally closed, the apartment was quiet again except for the sound of Sarah humming softly to herself as she started to clear the dishes in the kitchen. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the comfortable, happy mess of a successful party, and felt a sense of profound peace settle over me. Tonight, I realized, was the happiest I had ever been. And it wasn't because of the apologies or the promises of change. It was because, for the first time, I felt completely and unapologetically myself. I walked into the kitchen to help Sarah, picking up a cloth to wipe down the dining table while she ran water in the sink. The warm light from the overhead fixture caught in her dark hair, and I smiled as I watched her. This incredible woman who had walked into my life and changed everything. "Getting tired yet?" I teased her. "You've been on your feet all night. I'm starting to worry you're going to pass out before we get through all these plates." Sarah turned from the sink and winked at me. "I'm a nurse, Leo. I'm used to working shifts that are a lot longer and a lot less fun than this." She paused, her expression turning more serious. "But honestly, I didn't know how tonight was going to go. What did you think?" I smiled but didn't answer her right away. Instead, I walked over to the large window in my living room and looked out at the vast, glittering expanse of the Austin skyline. A torrent of thoughts and feelings rushed through me, a quiet but powerful current. Tonight was the best night of my life. And it wasn't because of the party or the speeches or the apologies. It was because, for the very first time, I felt like I was enough. I didn't have to perform or achieve or sacrifice to be worthy of notice. I just had to be. And that was all that mattered. I closed my eyes, letting the feeling wash over me, a sense of deep, quiet gratitude. I was grateful for this life, and I was so incredibly grateful that it had brought Sarah back to me. She hadn't just saved my life in that hospital. She had saved me from the prison of my own making. She was the one who taught me that love wasn't transactional, and that I could protect my own heart and still be a good person. I had no idea what I had ever done to deserve someone like her, but every single day I was thankful that she had chosen to be here with me. My mind drifted back to the accident, to those first terrifying days in the hospital when I wasn't sure I would ever be whole again. I was grateful to whatever force in the universe had allowed me to survive. There were moments when I was certain I wouldn't make it. But here I was. I was stronger now than I had ever been. Not because I was special or chosen, but because I had Sarah. I had my friends, and I finally had myself, the man who was learning day by day how to believe he was worth saving. And then, my thoughts turned to my parents and my brother, the people who had caused me so much pain. And in that moment, I realized I was grateful for them too. I was grateful that they had finally been able to see their own mistakes, even if it took them a lifetime to get there. My parents had been unfair. They had made me feel small and invisible, but tonight I saw a genuine desire to make things right. And Alex, he was trying. For the first time, he was really trying. And for that, I was grateful. I had no idea what our future as a family would look like. But I was grateful that we were all, in our own ways, taking the first tentative steps toward building something better. Sarah came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her head on my back. "What are you thinking about so hard over here?" she murmured. I laughed and turned around in her arms, pulling her close and resting my chin on the top of her head. "Just feeling grateful," I said softly. "Thank you for tonight, Sarah. For everything." She snuggled closer, her voice a warm whisper against my chest. "We're a team, Leo, don't you ever forget it." I held her there in the warm golden light of my apartment, looking out at the endless glittering stars, and felt completely at peace. The most profound lesson of this entire year wasn't about demanding fairness from the world. It was about creating it for myself, by drawing lines in the sand, by learning to love the person I was, and by pouring my energy into the people who truly mattered. Sarah was my anchor. My family was a fragile, newfound hope. And I was finally simply me, a man who had discovered that true happiness isn't found in some perfect, idealized future, but in the quiet, simple, beautiful moments just like this one.